You're listening to Building the Broncos with Nick Kendell and Carl Dumler, Broncos Country's leading draft and scouting analysts. Head on over to milehighhuddle.com to sound off on all things Broncos.
Hello there, Broncos Country, and it is once again time for another episode of Building the Broncos. I'm your host, Carl Dumler, and with me as always I have my co-host and good friend, Mr. Nick Kendell. Nick, how are you doing, buddy?
Hey, doing pretty well. It didn't rain here that much this weekend, so that's good. The ARC process is slowed down a little bit, but it looks like it's going to rain again all next week. So, yeah, it's been it's crazy. A lot of flooding in this area. And I was up in a buddy's house this weekend, took advantage of the weather, and pulled off siding off of his house. So that was a tedious process. I stepped on a nail, so thank God for a tetanus shot. Vaccines, but that's for another topic. Yeah, that's for something else entirely.
Yeah, right.
But yeah, no, doing pretty well. How are you doing?
I'm good, man. I'm good. Got my mother-in-law in town. Our daycare is closed for the week, so she's hanging out with my kid, and so giving me some time to get caught up on everything because summer's already been pretty crazy, and so just kind of, I don't know, pittering around a little bit, trying to get everything done and enjoying life. It's finally sunny here. It's warm. I just bought some soccer. I know, oh my goodness, I'm talking about the other football, but just bought some soccer shin pads, and I'm excited to get some adult soccer going here in town. Who
is your club of choice?
That's a good question.
So you definitely like playing soccer, but not really following it, watching it.
I watch the World Cup. I mean, because it's got that. You got that pride of your home country, but also I like watching some of the other top players just go at it. As for actual clubs, no, I don't really watch it too much. I'm more of I love to play it. Sure. Oh man, I got to play a few weeks back for the first time, really going full out. And my team, I hope they're not listening, but they were not good. I had some of the best passes of my life that set up, I mean, the most amazing goals. And a guy would miss from 2 feet.
Sounds like you're playing with me.
Oh, it was very sad. I should have had probably about 15 assists and another 10 goals. And it was, I mean, we played for hours upon hours. So, but it was a lot of fun. And I love getting out running. That's one of my favorite things. I'm in the middle of training for a Spartan run out there in Colorado. So if anybody's joining the Spartan run in Colorado in August, I'd love to meet up with you guys. Also plan on heading out to camp before I go do that. So it should be a fun upcoming time, but we got plenty to talk about. It's mandatory mini camp this week. And so make sure that you're following us on Twitter, as we'll be tweeting, I'm sure, about plenty that's going on. You can follow me at Carl Dumler MHH. And, of course, you can find Nick at Nick Kendell MHH. And you can follow the podcast Twitter account at BTB Football Pod. And make sure you subscribe to our show and leave us a rating, as we value your input on our show. You can find the show on iTunes, Stitcher, and even that of YouTube. You can also make sure to head over to Mile High Huddle, an affiliate of 24/7 Sports and the CBS Sports Digital, to find ours and our co-writers' articles and all things that pertain to your Denver Broncos. If you enjoy our show, make sure you head on over and leave us a 5-star rating on iTunes, where Building the Broncos along with Huddle Up are found under the Huddle Up podcast. This podcast is powered by Overtime Media. So one of the fun games that's going on around Twitter right now and Facebook and everything else, I mean, it's off season, so there's always a little bit of different football conversations going on. And so we thought we'd kind of jump in on one of them here and take on the quarterback tiers. And what we think, how they break down what players belong where. And it's always interesting to see how people would grade different players. And, I mean, for the most part, I do think you and I will agree on most things. But we seem to agree on a lot, but that's because we talk football all the time. And
echo chamber.
Right. We get that like-mindedness going. But anyway, we still have a few disagreements, and so I'm excited to get to talk about this with you. And I figure let's start with the first one that's pretty easy. It's the group that's too early to tell. These are the players that, I mean, nobody can say one way or the other right now. Some of them have played a little bit in the NFL, others haven't, but just little flashes here and there. And then I'd like to get your opinion I guess just put you on the spot of maybe who you think will actually rise up and succeed and who you think is going to fall flat on their face. But the too early to tell group, you and I agree on all these. Kyler Murray, Daniel Jones, Drew Lock, Dwayne Haskins. Those are easy ones because they're rookies. And then you got the second-year guys, Sam Darnold, Josh Allen, Josh Rosen, Lamar Jackson. And then there's a name here that might surprise some people, but it's probably really we don't know what the guy is yet. And that's Jimmy Garoppolo of the 49ers. And so I guess start with one that you would put your stamp on and say this is the guy that's going to succeed.
Well, for a lot of these quarterbacks, I don't know if they are exactly total franchise changers. Obviously a franchise quarterback is a franchise changer, but I'm talking like an elite level, top 5 level quarterback. And I don't know if any of these guys will end up being that based on what we've seen so far. So it's kind of hard to say. What I'm getting at, I guess, is that what's around them is going to matter a lot, from the coaching staff, the scheme, to the weapons around them, to the pass blocking. So I think that matters a lot for these guys. In a vacuum, I think that I would probably take Sam Darnold, but can you trust the Jets? I mean, can you trust Adam Gase? I mean,
that's who I was thinking.
Yeah, I mean, talent-wise, on tape, based on the college and everything, that's who I would lean with. But the organization of the Jets right now, I mean, the Le'Veon Bell, the coach didn't even want him. I don't know. It seems very concerning to me. Right. And that, on the other hand, a guy that I did not like coming out that much, Josh Allen, because the erraticness of his game, the inaccuracy, they're building really well around him, and I really believe in. I think Sean McDermott's a heck of a coach. So it really does matter. Landing spot matters for these quarterbacks. You know,
right?
We can't grade them in a vacuum. You don't analyze them in a vacuum, but when they come into the league, that's not in a vacuum either. So, man, I'll be a homer and I'll say Drew Lock. I'll be a total homer just because I think that the Broncos are building good infrastructure around him.
Right.
And I'm excited about Scangarello, and I think they have some good young offensive pieces. And outside of the Chargers, I mean, this isn't a division that, I mean, I guess the Broncos as well, but the Raiders and the Chiefs, they're not really building great defensive squads. So, and you got Munchak here and a bunch of stuff. I mean, we talked about it ad nauseum all offseason, but I guess I'll be a homer for once in my life and be an optimist. And I'll go with Drew Lock here, but if I can't pick Lock, man, I guess I'll go with Sam Darnold, but the Jets makes me very weary.
Man, listeners, mark it down.
Yeah, I know, optimism. It's sunny
June 4th,
here.
2019. Oh, man. Are we betting a drink on this one? I'm just kidding.
Oh,
I actually believe in Drew Lock, too, because, like you said, situation really does matter for a quarterback. There's very few quarterbacks that I would sit here and say it doesn't matter what team they went to, they were going to be successful. Peyton Manning's one because, I mean, he is the offense. It doesn't matter what coordinator you put around him. He can make players become all-star players. I mean, the offensive line's in front of him. They hardly ever had to block successfully for him to be very, very successful in the NFL. So he is one that I think he could go about anywhere. And really, the Colts, I don't think they were a well-ran organization for the most part when he was there. I think that they had some mistakes that they made along the way, who they paid, all those kind of things. But he's one of the few that I'd sit there and say, yep, anywhere he goes. But I think like Tom Brady, I think he landed in the perfect situation where he didn't have to start right away. I think he got into a very good system that they have really worked and honed in as much as possible. And he's been very fortunate to have the same offensive coordinator year in, year out for a long time now. And I mean, I'm not trying to say Josh McDaniels is this all-star, but that consistency matters.
Yeah.
When you're talking about these guys and not having to learn a whole new system every year. And I look at Josh Rosen. I mean, he's already in his second system being in Miami. And just kind of Miami's that's a bad situation.
Yeah, it's not great. Although I feel like I trust Flores more than Gase.
Well, yeah, I do too, and that's why I'm with you. I can't. It's hard for me to pick Sam Darnold. I think he's the most talented, or that has the highest upside of being that quarterback that could really jump into that top 5, top 7 quarterback conversation. But he's in a really a bad situation where I think it could explode at any time. Yeah,
and I don't love their offensive line. I know they brought in Clichy Osemele, but still, some people talked about them maybe going after Jonah Williams. Obviously, getting Quentin Williams is good, but I don't trust that offensive line protecting Darnold. And we saw his sophomore year that he was starting to develop some bad habits as far as facing pressure, and that continued early on last year. He kind of got hot there at the end last year, but still. And then the pass weapons. I mean, Rodney Anderson. I think that's about it that I can think of. Quincy Enunwa. Can't even name a tight end of theirs. And I know they brought in Le'Veon Bell, but again, it sounds like their head coach didn't even want him.
Right.
So it's I think Darnold's very talented. Obviously, you were the biggest Darnold fan last year. Yep. And it's too bad he didn't end up in Denver. But although I'm very happy with Chubb. But yeah, probably Darnold. What about the rookies? Let's say you're not taking Drew Lock. What are these rookies?
Honestly, I'd probably go Kyler Murray.
Really? Okay. How come?
Partly, I think if there is any head coach that can be successful with Kyler Murray, it's the guy that he's got. I do think that they have some weapons around him. They don't have a great offensive line, obviously, in front of him, but he's got Larry Fitzgerald. He's got himself a running back. I'm trying to remember the guy from
David Johnson.
Dave Johnson. Yep. I think that's a huge help for Arizona. I think he's got some young wide receivers that can help him out.
They brought in Andy Isabella, Hakeem Butler. They drafted Christian Kirk last year in the second round, I believe.
And we were big Christian Kirk fans.
Yeah.
And so it's a matter of getting that offensive line right, but it's also where Kyler Murray's he's one of those few guys that can make something out of nothing. When I'm looking at this group of quarterbacks, I mean, Daniel Jones has a little bit of running ability. I wouldn't want him running a ton. Drew Lock has some running ability, but again, I don't want him running a ton. Dwayne Haskins is the least athletic of the group. And Washington Redskins, now they've got, 3 quarterbacks that they're paying pretty good money to. That whole situation's pretty chaotic right now. Their head coach is red hot on the hot seat. I don't think he'll make it past this season. So then all of a sudden you're getting a new coach in. Who are you getting? Some of their people are getting a little bit older. He does have a pretty good offensive line there. But I guess Kyler Murray, just because he can do so much beyond just the scope of the play, is why I would pick him. If I had to pick a quarterback other than Drew Lock, and I've already said, Drew Lock, I think he is in the best situation of any of these quarterbacks. He has the least amount of pressure because the other ones were first-round picks. He can sit a year. He can learn. He's got a system that's really set up well for him. He's got a lot of playmakers around him. He's got an offensive line that should be improved with Munchak, and it sounds like Munchak's going to be around for a while. All those things are playing really well in his favor. But if I'm picking somebody else, I'm going Kyler Murray. You?
I'll probably go Haskins just for the fact that I don't trust Cliff Kingsbury at all. I mean, this is a guy who wasn't successful with Patrick Mahomes and had the other quarterback there as well, Baker Mayfield.
Yep.
So it's just like, I just can't trust him. That there's just too many variables there. So I'll probably go with Haskins. I know that Gruden there is on the hot seat, but I think they got a bunch of pieces coming back on the offensive side of the ball as far as injuries. I mean, Brandon Scherff was injured last year. Darius Geis is going to be back. They brought in Terry McLaurin. I think Jordan Reed's going to be back, so I think that he is set up with the best nest, so to speak. But yeah, overall, it's too early to tell. Let's run through these guys quickly. I know it's too early to tell, but let's say if you're going to project them somewhere, like one of the other tiers. So we have below average, average, above average, borderline elite, and elite. So Kyler Murray, a year from now, where is he going to be?
He's probably the one with the biggest variance.
Yes, probably.
I'm going to put him in the average group.
Okay.
I mean, I know that's the cop-out.
Yeah.
It's kind of the middle of the road, but I think he's going to have those times where he looks elite, but he's going to have those other times where you're like, man, you got to play within the scope of the play.
Yeah.
And so I think he's going to just kind of be all over the place. He's going to have some great games, and then he's going to have some huge duds of games as well.
Okay.
So that's where I'm putting him. Where are you putting him?
I'll probably put him at average as well, just because I don't think that Arizona defense is great, so they're going to let him throw it around a bit. They got some weapons for him, so he's going to have some Jameis Winstonism to him, if that makes sense. where he's going to show the flashes early. It's not really putting it together. And somebody's like, well, we see the flashes. Once he gets it all together and protects the ball better, blah, 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 he's going to be great. And who knows if he takes that step. But that's what I think will happen. Daniel Jones, for me, I think he'll be below average. Obviously, surprise.
What?
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, I'm with you. I just, you and I both didn't really like him coming out. I had some moments where I was like, okay, he's showing something. But every game, you just always saw that 2 or 3 plays. You're just like, man, what are you doing? And I know some would say the same about Drew Lock. But Drew Lock actually has a bigger arm. I think showed a little bit more with less around him at times. I played in a tougher division, all those kind of things. And Daniel Jones, I just don't trust him. And I don't trust the Giants either. That's part of it too.
Yeah, totally. I do think Shermer's a solid offensive coach, but I don't trust Gettleman. So it's gotta have both those guys. We'll skip Drew Lock because we talked about him a lot. Dwayne Haskins, average for me.
Yeah, I mean it's hard to put any of these quarterbacks above that area.
Yeah,
I mean we all talked about it before this draft that it was not a great quarterback draft. I mean, some guys with some upside, but yet a lot of these guys, it was 1 year starting or things that you knew that they had to work on. And I just can't see him being better than, say, like a Dak Prescott or a Derek Carr, who, I mean, I'm giving it away a little bit, but some guys that we have in that average tier.
Yeah. Easier question here. Which of these guys isn't average? Those are the ones remaining. So you got like Haskins, Darnold, Allen, Rosen, Lamar Jackson, and Jimmy Garoppolo. Anybody below average or above average?
Well, I'm going to put Lamar Jackson as below average.
Okay. Yeah, I agree with you there. Not Josh Rosen? I don't trust Miami's another team that has, like, who is he throwing it to?
That's a good point. I mean, I think stats-wise he'll be in that below average. But it's one of those, does the tape line up with the stats? Because sometimes the stats just don't show everything, where if he's getting killed out there like he was in Arizona, can you really put it all on him? No, you can't. And so you got to get the full picture of what's going on. I think he is one of those guys, though, I worry going from one terrible situation to now another terrible situation. Is this kind of like that David Carr situation where you ruin him before you ever get a chance to see his potential?
It might be. We'll see. He does have one of the best young left tackles in football, but as we saw the years of Joe Thomas in Cleveland, even if you have a Hall of Fame worthy left tackle, it still takes an entire unit on the offensive line. So
it does. And really in today's NFL, because so much is done in the shotgun, that blindside protector is just not as important.
And
it's important. I'm not trying to discredit having a good left tackle, but I mean, you look at how money is being divided between the offensive line now. It's starting to get more even among the positions.
Yeah. I would say also we're seeing the game change a bit where defensive fronts, I mean, this is 10 years ago this started to happen, but defensive players are starting to be moved around and isolated against the weakest players on the offensive line. And so even if you have a great left tackle, they're going to flip it and isolate a pass rusher against a team's weakest player. So it doesn't matter as much. You need to be solid across the board and have depth.
Right.
And finally, I guess Jimmy Garoppolo. I have him here as before we way too early to tell because I think he has less starts than Baker Mayfield even has. You know, like we saw him get hot there at the end against some bad teams in the 49ers 2 years ago, and he was on 49ers were undefeated then, and he played solid. Doesn't have amazing traits, but, nor does Brady, so he's peppering the ball and working that system well. But then last year, looking okay, and then got the ACL. So I know they paid him that big dollar contract, but and I mean, if you put him as average, I'd have no issue with it, but I'm still a little bit wait and see.
I'm with you. I mean, because he's shown enough good. Yeah. Plus, he has one of the best offensive minds coaching him. And you look at last year, so many of their weapons went down with injuries, all those kind of things. And so now get Jimmy Garoppolo back. You got maybe the first or second best tight end in football since Gronk retired. And you got some wide receivers that are very good fits with their system, all those kind of things. I think of all the quarterbacks that are going to be starting this year of this list, I think Jimmy Garoppolo is probably the one that's set up the most for success this year. because I don't expect Drew Lock obviously to start this year.
Yeah.
And I mean, Josh Allen's up there a little bit with the talent that he's got around him as well.
What about Lamar Jackson? I mean, Baltimore might have the best defense in football. I feel like people are sleeping on them a little bit right now, and they really are catering a unique offense for him. I mean, they brought in Ingram, they drafted Justice Hill, Marquise Brown. They got a plethora of tight ends and a solid offensive line. I mean, I don't really trust Jackson the thrower. He needs to be much more consistent. But like, as far as grinding out games and winning football games, which I mean, it's what it comes down to. I could see them being a speed version of what the Broncos were with Tebow.
And I get that. I mean, like you said, talent around him is definitely very, very nice.
Yeah.
I don't think the talent lines up with his skill set all that well.
Besides the fact that they can grind games with their defense.
Right. I mean, I will say, though, right now, they do have Shane Ray as a starter. So how good can their defense really be? Yeah,
that's true.
I'm just kidding.
Their defensive backfield is pretty good, even though they lost Weddle and Mosley. I mean, Marlon Humphrey is an emerging stud. They got some guys that can play back there. But, yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, no. I do think there's a lot of talent on that roster, and I understand why they moved on from Joe Flacco. I just think when you look at everything they had and you add even like an average quarterback like Joe Flacco, I think they could have been a pretty successful team this year. Where Lamar Jackson, the problem with him is there's just so much variance in what he can do on the field. I mean, he can make some great throws. He's obviously fast. He's got all those things going for him. But it just depends on what kind of team they line up against and how much NFL teams figure out about him, too.
Yeah.
I mean, 1 year of tape usually begins to change some things. So we'll kind of see how that plays out for them. And, I mean, like I said, Lamar's set up for a lot of success, but I still have him as a below-average quarterback, so I think he will be the one that holds them back from being a top-tier team this year.
I can't disagree. All right, now the below-average guys here. For me, I wrote this first, so you didn't change what I wrote, did you? You just have comments in there? Okay.
Right.
Making sure. Okay, my below-average tier here. Case Keenum, Washington Redskins. Obviously, anybody, welcome to the podcast. I'm not a Case Keenum fan. Marcus Mariota, he has flashes, but he is like Helen Keller in the pocket. Like, no pocket movement, just stands there. For being that athlete, there's just no fluidity to him. He looks rigid. Ryan Tannehill, kind of same case there, both Titans. Then Eli Manning, two-time Super Bowl winner, had some good years, but I feel like the best is definitely behind him, and losing OBJ, it's going to be worse for sure. And then Ryan Fitzpatrick, I mean, he is what he is. He's made a nice career for himself. Well, I think he was a 7th-round pick or something, bounced around, but obviously a below-average quarterback for a starter. We put Rosen and Fitzpatrick in here. Any team that doesn't have a really, for sure, solidified starter. And then Jameis Winston, again, a guy with a lot of flashes, but he averages, I think, like a turnover and a half per game with the interceptions and fumbles, and you just can't have it. You just can't have that. So we'll see what happens with Bruce Arians there. But for right now, I think, both those guys, Mariota and Winston being the 1st and 2nd overall pick in, gosh, would that have been 2014? I think so. Probably. Let's just call it 2014. But both those guys have been very underwhelming.
I think 2015.
2015? Okay.
Yep. I think. I mean, well, yeah, it doesn't really matter too much. I'm going to agree with all but one of these. And part of it is I'm figuring that the boost in the coaching staff around him is going to help his game a lot. And I like this guy coming out. I think he's just kind of gotten into a bad situation, and he's one of those guys. I don't think he's always had to work as hard as he should have. But that's Jameis Winston. I mean, you just talked about him. He does have all the turnovers, and I mean, But again, getting Bruce Arians as your head coach, I think is going to set up well for him. I think that I just like Bruce Arians. There's something about him. I think he has a pretty good system. I do worry about their offensive line, how it's going to hold up on that air raid system. But I do like their offensive weapons and Chris Godwin, Mike Evans. I think Mike Evans is one of the more underrated receivers in the game.
Yeah, top 10 for sure, borderline top 5.
Yes.
For me.
And then you get O.J. Howard back from injury. And so right there, you got yourself a pretty good looking group. Ronald Jones, I'm hoping he'll be improved in year 2 as a running back. They also have Peyton Barber. Not great, but it's enough. And so, again, it kind of comes down to the offensive line around him to kind of help him out. But I kind of like what they have going there. And, again, just their coach. I think there's some opportunity for success there. And so I have him in my average group. And then I move down a guy into this below average group in Nick Foles. And I know some people are going to fight that because they're going to look at the Super Bowl run that he had that great Super Bowl game. He also had the time with Philly before where he had, 20 touchdowns to 2 interceptions? Something like that.
Yeah, I think so.
But you look beyond those 2 stretches, he has been well below average. And I just don't trust him outside of that Philadelphia system. Yeah. He's really struggled beyond that. You look at, there's been a lot of years outside of Philadelphia where he was below 60% completion percentage. There was seasons where he was less touchdowns than interceptions. You look at his yards per attempt. I mean, it just goes all over the place.
Yeah.
And so for me personally, just seeing him go down to Jacksonville where he's got this big contract, he's expected to be the man. And on top of that, I'm not exactly the biggest fan of Jacksonville and some of the things that they've done on that offense.
Yeah.
They have a few weapons, but it's not – I mean, wide receiver-wise, D.D. Westbrook, Marquise Lee, they're okay.
Yeah.
Behind them, you have Terrell Pryor, who's kind of up and down. DJ Shark, I'm excited to see what he can do here in his second year. Chris Conley, I think he's a good number 3 kind of wide receiver for a team. And Leonard Fournette, if he ever figures it out – I mean, could be top-tier running back in the game. And I do like some of their offensive line pieces. Andrew Norwell coming back from injury, Cam Robinson, Brandon Linder. I mean, that's a good left side of the offensive line. The right side's not that great. And then Josh Oliver joining the tight end group. I mean, if he can get it this rookie year, then Nick Foles can have some success. But I don't feel like that's set up for success.
Yeah, and you know what? He's one of the guys that I went back and forth on as well. But I think pairing him back up with DeFilippo and the recent success of him, and especially in the playoffs, and just stabilizing force in Jacksonville. I mean, after the years of Blake Bortles, it's a big improvement. So, I'm fine with him being below average. I got to ask, how close were you to adding Joe Flacco to below average? Was that ever a thought in your mind? Because
it was
for me too. Like
it really was.
If there was a tier between average and below average, that's probably where he'd be for me.
Right. I mean, you look at his last 5 years.
Yeah.
He's not been great at all.
No.
Some of that's him because he's never been an above average quarterback, I would say. I mean, playoffs, yes, he has some success. But I still contribute that so much more to having a good offensive line, having a strong running game, and having a very, very strong defense. Where there's games where in the playoffs, they're like, dude, just don't lose us this game. If you can do that, then you can go have success for us. But, of course, then he gets paid, and they've only had, 2 winning seasons since he got paid. He had the 2014 season where they were actually very good. He had a very, very good season where 27 touchdowns, 12 interceptions. That was with Gary Kubiak. They had a very, very strong run game, just a really dynamic offense, really, if you look at it. But since then, it's just been downhill, and he's actually, I would say, looked worse each year since then. With the exception of this last year. I thought this last year he started showing a few signs before he got injured, where he was improving a little bit and getting back more to that 2014 form. But no, he does. He's a guy that should be right there on the edge.
Yep, I cannot disagree.
I wouldn't take him over any of the other guys we have in the average group.
Yeah, that's true. Well, before we get to that, though, we should probably take a quick break. So we will be right back to talk more quarterback tiers.
This is the Overtime Podcast Network.
All righty, and we're back on the Building the Broncos podcast. I'm Nick along with Carl, and today we are discussing our quarterback tiers heading into the season. obviously it's the offseason. We're coming up to some dead time, and Zach and Chad have been covering more of the day-to-day stuff with the mini camps and OTAs and everything. So we're talking a little bit more general stuff and, obviously the roster breakdown, but talking quarterback tiers today because this has been a podcast that's been very much about the quarterback position over the past few years. I mean, going from Simeon and Lynch to Case Keenum to now Joe Flacco and Drew Lock. So a lot of quarterback takes in here, and we figured, it's the offseason, kind of time to take an overtop view on the league as a whole. So we've talked about some of our lower tier guys so far. The too early to tell is Kyler Murray, Daniel Jones, Drew Lock, Dwayne Haskins, Sam Darnold, Josh Allen, Josh Rosen, Lamar Jackson, and Jimmy Garoppolo. To our below average, I had Case Keenum, Mariota, Ryan Tannehill, Eli Manning, Ryan Fitzpatrick, and Jameis Winston. Carl moved Winston into his average and kicked down Foles to below average. But now we're on to our average, and obviously Carl doesn't have Nick Foles here, but he does have Jameis Winston here. My guys that I have listed in the average tier for myself, I have Dak Prescott, Derek Carr, Joe Flacco, Mitchell Trubisky, Andy Dalton, Nick Foles, and Kirk Cousins. And for me, just overall, I think that Joe Flacco is one, like we talked about just a second ago, that he's one that I kind of went back and forth on as being below average to average. Also had the same thought about Andy Dalton, but just kind of how trying to make a bell curve here, trending in between above average and average. So it made sense to have him here. And another one that I had, same with Nick Foles, and one that I almost put as too early was Mitchell Trubisky, even though he's had 2 seasons. I just feel like, I don't know, average is fine with him, but I'm curious, like he has a lot of deficiencies still, and I just feel like it's not all together yet. So he's one that also I could see him having, he could have a good year next year to take that step forward, but I could see him either playing the same or worse and being kicked down to that below average tier.
He's definitely a tough one to figure out because he has times in games where he looks pretty special, makes some great plays with his feet and his arm. And then other times where he just looks very, very lost and kind of that chicken with his head cut off. That's Mitchell Trubisky sometimes. He gets those happy feet going, and you're just like, oh, no, here we go. It could either be brilliance or complete everything falls apart kind of thing. And so I'm with you. It could be a little too early to tell with him. He was another one that I kind of went back and forth a little bit on, of maybe putting him in that below average group just because he does have so many times where he needs a lot around him. And really in Chicago, he has had a ton of talent around him. I like the pieces that they have for their team. I think they have a pretty good offensive line. Not great, but it's good enough. Allen Robinson is a good wide receiver. Taylor Gabriel. Anthony Miller is a great receiver. They just got Riley Ridley. So they also have Cordero Patterson now. I mean, that's some pretty good weapons around him. Trey Burton, Adam Shaheen for the tight end position. Again, good weapons. Running back. I am interested to see how things change this year for that position since they decided to move on from their one guy. What's his name? Jordan Howard.
Yes.
And now they have David Montgomery. But, I mean, Tariq Cohen, he's one of the dynamic weapons in the NFL. So, I mean, it's just going to be interesting to see how they put that all together. But I felt like there was a lot of times last year where Mitchell Trubisky was the guy that held them back.
Yeah.
That he was that guy that, I mean, because you look at how dynamic that defense was. I mean, probably top 2 defense in the NFL last season. And again, they had a strong running game, pretty good offensive line, some weapons around him, and he still didn't quite look great.
Yeah. It's just the inconsistencies. You touched, I mean, he has issues throwing his left and still young. I mean, only 1 year starting experience, right? Like, that's a big thing. So we'll see. A lot of tools, and I do trust the offensive system and the offensive or the head coach there. So that's a big thing. I got to ask, what about Derek Carr?
I mean, I think he fits in this average group. He's had that one great season, and you look at the other seasons, and it's not been terrible. It's not been great. Yeah. So, I mean, that fits the exact definition of average. He hasn't always had a lot of talent around him. Other than that when he was on his rookie contract, they did get some talent around him there for a little bit. But beyond that, it's just been – it's not looking pretty. This year he's got a little more talent around him. We'll see how much the personalities kind of play into all that. Yeah. I don't know how they're going to make that all work. And there's times where you look at his coach, Gruden. I still can't tell. Does Gruden like him or not? Because you hear both sides of that. You hear people say, no, they're not good they're not good friends, that he was looking to replace Derek Carr all offseason, just couldn't figure it out. And then other times, oh, yeah, they're best friends. They love each other. So I'm still trying to figure out exactly what their relationship is moving forward. But for me personally, I mean, I like Derek Carr. Yeah. But I told a lot of Raiders fans, I said, once he gets his big contract, your Super Bowl window closes. You look at anybody on this list of the average guys. I mean, I guess Nick Foles did go on to win a Super Bowl because he's in your average tier.
Yeah.
But for the most part, most of these guys, you need a lot of pieces around them to make it work for a Super Bowl run.
Yeah. You are definitely correct in that. And I guess out of any of these guys, do you see any of these guys making a Super Bowl run potentially?
I mean, probably the one guy that maybe stands a chance is Dak Prescott because he's still on that rookie contract.
Yeah, and the Cowboys do have a pretty darn talented roster around him.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's this year make or break for them.
Yeah. They're going to make him the highest paid quarterback in the NFL.
They shouldn't.
Yeah.
They will, is my guess. I mean, that's just how NFL contracts work.
He'd be smart if they went the Case Keenum route. Or not Case Keenum. Excuse me, Kirk Cousins, where it's you don't pay him as much, but you give him more guaranteed.
Right.
Just to create some cap room.
Right, exactly. So, I mean, yeah, I'm not seeing anybody that just jumps off the page. I mean, Andy Dalton, no. And I don't trust Cincinnati one bit either.
Yeah, every single one of these guys that isn't on their rookie deal is a guy that a team should be looking to replace.
Right.
That's the level they are.
Right.
So, all right, ready to move on to above average?
Yeah, let's do it.
All righty. And you don't have any complaints here from my knowledge. Oh, maybe you did talk about one earlier. You had one in your average I have my above average here, and that is one that I'm actually going to put my hat on here. I think I'm not totally into the mania as some are, but I think Baker Mayfield has already shown enough that I'm okay putting him in the above average, and I think that they're building a really solid roster, a nest, so to speak, for him in Cleveland. So I'm going to put him in this above average category. I do think you had him in average, though, but for me, I'll go with above average. Another guy above average would be Jared Goff. Has some deficiencies, but again, trust the system around him, and I think he's a guy that can run the system well, kind of a Matt Ryan-esque kind of player that can get to another level. Deshaun Watson, a lot of flashes. I am very concerned about that offensive line, but if you can get a full healthy season from Will Fuller and Foreman, the running back they drafted a few years ago, looks to be healthy, and obviously DeAndre Hopkins, probably a top 3 wide receiver in football right now, definitely top 5, probably top 3. I feel like there's a lot of variance between the top 5,
right?
But for sure, Matt Stafford, a lot of talent. He's carried some pretty darn poor rosters, poor run games, poor defenses, etc. A lot of bad coaches as well. But the talent is obvious. And then a guy that I have here above average, I think some people might contest this, but I think that age is coming, and I think that the roster has taken some talent hits this past couple seasons, and that's Ben Roethlisberger. I mean, you're losing Mike Munchak. You lost Le'Veon Bell, who they didn't have last year, but I mean, still that affected Ben Roethlisberger. Now you lost Antonio Brown, and I am a big fan of Juju Smith-Schuster, who, emerging as a top 15 receiver, probably, I think he's only like 21, 22 years old still, but I think Ben Roethlisberger, I'm going to put him in the above average category because I feel like he's not looked as good the past few years.
I'm with you. I mean, you're right. Their roster has taken a pretty big hit. I mean, when you're talking about the offensive side, you're losing maybe the best wide receiver in football, maybe. I mean, with his 3 years ago, I don't know if it was all that debatable, but He's gotten older. He's gotten very boisterous.
He's gotten crazier.
Yes, very much so. The run game, I mean,
Connor's solid, but he's not the receiver that Bell is. That's the huge thing.
Right, exactly. And then, like you said, Munchak, losing him, that's huge. I mean, their entire group has talked about that.
Yeah.
They are still a talented group, but you're talking about, I mean, I think I sent you something on Facebook the other day about they finished as the second best pass blocking offensive line. And that's a mix of talent and a coach that knows what he's doing.
Yeah.
And so it makes me excited for the Broncos, who ranked 26th this last year, according to PFF, that they're getting a guy that just coached the second best. And I don't expect it to be that high, obviously. I'm not going to go that big of a homer, but I do expect it to be improved.
If he can get him to top 15 this year, that's a huge win.
Right.
I think the Broncos, despite having a bottom 10 pass blocking unit on the offensive line, I think they had a top 10 run blocking. So, I will take a little bit. It's a passing league. I'll take a little bit off the run blocking if the pass blocking can improve, personally.
Right.
So
yeah, I'm with you. And so, I agree with you. I do think Ben's very, very talented, but it's not been quite to the level that it's been in the past. And he just of all the quarterbacks that are of that older age, his body's taken the most beating.
Yeah.
Just his style of game makes it to head in that direction. And now, yes, he did have the most touchdowns he's had. Was it in his career last year? He
had a good statistical output in the touchdown game, but I think they ran the ball less in the red zone.
Right.
And it just wasn't as efficient.
Right. He did have a lot of interceptions. He had 16 interceptions last year, so that's not a good number to have. And so, he's kind of that guy if we had a group in between, he'd probably be the guy on this list that I'd put in that in-between group.
Hall of Famer.
Yes.
But, yeah. So, we'll see. And I think, 34 touchdowns, great. A lot of passing yards, etc. But, I don't know. I feel like it's maybe I agree with you. It's kind of in between. He's one that I went back and forth on as well. I'd be fine either way, but I feel like I'd take all these other quarterbacks that I listed ahead of him before him. So.
I would too.
Yeah.
And now, like I said, I do have Baker Mayfield the tier up or tier down, I guess, whatever you want to call it,
at average.
But I did put that he has the most potential to move up.
Yeah.
Just this year, I'm a little bit worried about what the Browns are. Because anytime a team gets hyped up that's been terrible for a long time, it seems like they never live up to the hype. And you're talking also a lot of personality. I love Baker Mayfield's personality, but there's some times where he just seems to get a little too distracted by the media. And then, of course, OBJ,
Kareem Hunt.
There's a lot of things that are there that you're kind of going, how's
first time head coach?
Right.
We'll see.
So, that's probably one of those teams that has a ton of variance of what they could do this year. I could see him as a Super Bowl contender, and I could see him missing the playoffs.
I don't disagree.
And
I do have a scenario here for you because we do got to keep moving. But let's say, obviously, Watson being here, you agree with that, right?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Now, the question is, there's some talk that this guy's been on the block, and there's been some talk of trading him. Hypothetically, for the Broncos, Joe Flacco looks horrible next year, and Drew Lock looks more like Jake Locker. Okay, so quarterback situation, this is worst-case scenario. Broncos, however, defense picking better, everything. Broncos have, let's say, the 18th overall pick. Would you trade that pick for Matt Stafford?
In a heartbeat.
You would. 18 overall, first-round pick for Matt Stafford.
What is the first-round pick going to do that Matthew Stafford wouldn't bring to the team?
Not a thing. But you just have to take on that contract, I guess.
I understand that. And yes, that is a big contract, obviously. But you're still talking about a quarterback that can completely change the entire direction of the franchise.
Yeah.
And, he's not –
He's above average.
Yeah. It just – there's some things with him. The whole being in Detroit and just, he's had some terrible, terrible teams around him. I guess he did have one of the best wide receivers to ever play the game. But beyond that, there's still some things there that I'm kind of going, man, he needed more. And he did a lot of things with very little around him. So you bring him to Denver where there's a lot of talent already on the roster. You got a defensive-minded coach that can run that defense and do well with it, has some pieces on that defense. Although, we're going to talk about it here later this week of the defensive. They got a lot of pieces that are going to be on the market.
Yeah.
So it could be a whole new defense next year. We'll talk about that a little bit more. But still, when you have a chance to get a guy like Matthew Stafford, who is still playing at a very, very high level, doing a lot of great things, it's just hard for me to pass on an opportunity to get a guy like that, because I do think it opens up a nice window for your team moving forward. And I don't know. I would trade for him.
For
Would
sure.
you?
Yeah, I think I would too. I might even, a first and a third, because I think the talent is there. I mean, looking at these guys, he might be the toolsiest quarterback of all these guys listed at the above average, just playing in Detroit with the issues that is that franchise and playing behind Aaron Rodgers. It sucks. And maybe he has to come here and play against the young Brett Favre that is Patrick Mahomes. But I think if that everything goes wrong, I would take that chance. But we'd have to see, obviously, Drew Lock to have an idea of whether or not that we should make that move. But
right. And I will say he's only going to be 31 this year.
Yeah, he's not that old. He's still, and his tools are so good. He's probably still got another 7-8 years.
Yep.
So definitely worth it. And we'll see. There might be some interest there. So, all right, well, we're going to take another break here before we talk about our borderline elites and elites, but we will be right back after this.
This is the Overtime Podcast Network.
Alrighty, and we are back on the Building the Broncos podcast. I'm Nick, along with Carl, talking the borderline elite quarterbacks here, and I'm just going to run through the list. You didn't have any notes, so I think we probably have these next guys the same, which is kind of boring. Boo on you, Carl. No, I'm just kidding. But
personally, just looking over this list again, there's some guys that I'd be willing to take some chances on.
So the borderline elite, we have Andrew Luck, Patrick Mahomes, Carson Wentz, Phillip Rivers, and Cam Newton. And for elite, we have Aaron Rodgers, Tom Brady, Russell Wilson. Did I say Drew Brees?
Yep.
Okay, Drew Brees twice because he's so good now. And then just as a joke, I wrote down Tim Tebow of the Jesus Christ Crusaders. But anyway, I like to put in some jokes here for Carl every once in a while.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, no problem. But out of these guys, any moving around, any jockeying that you see, I guess the two that I would say that are potential elites that I just need to see another year from them are Andrew Luck because of the health. I mean, obviously, very talented quarterback, but I can't have 10 elite quarterbacks, right? So Andrew Luck he's right there, and what he did last year was great. I'm really excited to see this year. I mean, Colts, I think right now, if I was putting money on an AFC team that wasn't the Patriots, it'd be the Colts, just because the Chargers and the Chiefs are going to beat up each other. So I think Luck is primed to break out into this elite category. And Patrick Mahomes, amazing last year, one of the best first-year starting quarterbacks forget one of the best first-year starting quarterback ever, probably, or single season. But, what's going on with Tyreek Hill, and I got to see another season. I mean, we're talking about all these other quarterbacks that is too early to tell, and they have about the same sample size as Patrick Mahomes. So I still need to see a little bit more, but, I mean, the tools, everything, the system, wow, what a season. I mean, it's going to be a long 15 years playing against this kid. And you know what even is worse is that he comes off extremely likable. It's not even it's hard. Tom Brady comes off as this total jerkwad. Ben Roethlisberger, everything that's gone on with him, jerk. Phillip Rivers yelling, screaming around the sideline. Although I've kind of developed a respect over time with Phillip Rivers, but Patrick Mahomes, it's gosh darn it, I wish you were. Give me some flaw.
Yeah,
right. He sounds like Kermit the Frog. He sounds like Kermit. That's the biggest thing.
It's the same with Derek Carr. He's a nice guy.
But it's not like the elite, the level that it's not the flashes that Mahomes has.
Right, exactly. No, I was one. I went back and forth on Patrick Mahomes because he did things last year that I would say maybe one other quarterback in the league and Aaron Rodgers could do.
Cam Newton, maybe.
Cam Newton, yeah, but he can't do it to the consistency of those two.
Yeah. But he's never had a Tyreek Hill. Just throw it up and let him run and chase it. Or Travis Kelce. I mean, yeah, I'm just arguing to argue. But Cam Newton is also extremely physically talented, out of structure ability, big arm, etc.
Right, he is. I look at Cam Newton. I agree that he should be in this group. I think he gets a little bit underrated at times. But there are times where you see some – if I'm looking at any of these guys and I'm saying this guy has an absolute major weakness to his game, it's Cam Newton. Because he has the worst touch of any of the quarterbacks that we listed here. I mean, the guy wants to throw everything on a bullet. I mean, you go back to that Super Bowl against the Broncos. They're as great as our defense played. I'm not trying to take anything away from our defense, but there were some plays where receivers were open and Cam Newton just missed them. I mean, overthrew him big time. And I understand pressure of the situation, but there's been a lot of other games that I've watched of his where he just can't get the touchdown. I mean, he can't get a touchdown, but he also can't get the touch on the football. And I mean, it's one of my concerns with Drew Lock too.
Yeah.
There's times where he struggled with touch, where he has that cannon arm, and it's hard not to want to use that. But so Patrick Mahomes, like I said, there's just things he did last year that, other than Aaron Rodgers, I'm just sitting here saying I don't think I've seen somebody do this consistently. And it's just crazy. Some of these young quarterbacks that are in the game, Carson Wentz, if he doesn't get hurt the last couple of years, I mean, he's MVP consideration most of those years.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think some Eagles fans got a little too excited about Nick Foles and wanting to trade Carson Wentz. I would have traded about anything for that kid.
Yeah. He's a little bit older, which is a thing for quarterbacks, because just the red shirt and everything, the whole process with the Division II, but the injuries obviously now, but really, that was my quarterback in that draft.
Yeah.
It was too bad the Broncos won a Super Bowl, right? Like, we didn't have a chance because we won the Super Bowl. No, I'm just kidding.
Take that Super Bowl back.
Yeah, for sure.
We won our quarterback. No, I'm with you. And so, I mean, this is getting to the cream of the crop. You're just kind of arguing of what kind of quarterback you really like, what you want. I mean, because you got a large variance of different types of games here. I mean, Phillip Rivers doesn't have the strongest arm or anything like that, but he's got touch, he's got timing, he's got that leadership qualities. I mean, just the guy that just drives like crazy to be successful. And he's got talent around him to be successful. I mean, all these guys, it's kind of nice. I don't know. I guess it's not nice as a Broncos fan, but all of these guys have actually some pretty good pieces around them to be successful.
Man.
On top of them being talented.
It's almost like, as important as a quarterback is, can't do it alone.
You're right. I mean, and we're talking about like Matthew Stafford before.
I mean, even look at Aaron Rodgers last year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, did you look at Rodgers' stats last year?
Yeah, not as good, but I think he was playing hurt too.
Well, 25 touchdowns, only 2 interceptions.
Yeah. At some point, do you wonder, is he like conservative? Like, and I feel like this is totally, I mean, it's on topic, but it's a little bit off there. But the NFL changed that rule where it's a dead ball now when a defensive player jumps off sides.
Mm-hmm.
No player was hurt as much as Aaron Rodgers with that rule.
Right.
Because his ability to take advantage of those shots down the field when that defender jumped. I mean, I was sad for his highlights when that went that way. Because that's a third of his big plays. It's
true. It is true. I do think a little bit of being more conservative is, one, their system was not great. I mean, he talked about it was so boring. No guys were getting open. They were not scheming anything very well. It was getting to the point where it was Aaron Rodgers just go make a play. And sometimes as coaches, I remember with Jack Del Rio with the Broncos, there was some times with him where I'm going, man, this guy's out here coaching well. Well, then we got all that talent in 2014, and he just went to the most vanilla defense that you could ever imagine. It pretty much said, our 11 players are better than your 11. We're just going to go out there and win. And in the NFL, that just doesn't work. You got to mix talent with scheme, with making actual good decisions of what the other team's trying to do. And so for Rodgers, I do think some of it is he's just struggling. Nobody was getting open.
Yeah.
But I'm with you. I'm interested to see how he does this year with the new coach and new system, some new players coming in, all those kind of things. It'll be interesting to see what he can do this year.
Yeah, for sure. And now obviously we talked about the elites, Rodgers, Brady, Breeze, and Wilson. If you moved up Mahomes, Luck up there, I'd have no issue with it. If you moved down Wilson and you only wanted Breeze, Brady, and Rodgers, I'd have no issue with it. But I think, obviously, those guys are the cream of the crop, and all of them are going headfirst into Hall of Fame candidacy. I mean, Phillip Rivers is too. And he's a guy that, might be above. At some point, he'll trend down, and whatever, that's going to happen. And Cam Newton, the injuries, that's going to be a concern with him, the shoulder and everything. But overall, I think that this is a solid list, and I'm glad that we agree a fair amount, although I wish you were a little bit more contrarian. Maybe we need to get Eric on here again. That's a rock, Eric. No, it's a boulder, Nick. You're dumb. I'm like, okay.
I'm with you. Yeah. No, I mean, it just – most of these quarterbacks, they do seem to fit pretty well into these kind of categories. Some of them can move up a little bit down, all those kind of things, depending on what you like in a quarterback. But I will ask you this question, because you said – it sounds like you would have Russell Wilson fourth on your list of the elite.
I would, It depends the question you're asking, I guess.
So my question is, of the 4 elite, who would you take right now?
I'd probably take Rodgers.
Okay.
Yep. I mean, you have to pass the physical, but I think he's not the youngest, which Wilson is. I mean, if I had to take anybody, I'd take Patrick Mahomes, probably.
Well, yeah.
But that's like starting a franchise and whatnot. If I had to win one game, I'd pick Tom Brady. So happy medium there. I'll probably take Rodgers.
Okay. I just wanted to know how much the age side of things would be a factor in your decision. Because
it's up there enough to not take Brady or Breeze.
Yeah, I would take Russell Wilson.
Okay. Yeah. I have no issue.
I was so impressed with him last year. Yeah. I really thought the Seahawks were going to be one of the 5 worst teams in football. And I didn't think he had hardly any talent around him for that roster. And he just carried that team on his back. I mean, he just blew me away with what he did on the field.
Yeah, he's pretty darn special. And luckily, the Seahawks are not in the AFC West. Because, man, can you imagine substituting the Raiders with the Seahawks, and you got Russell Wilson and Patrick Mahomes? Just like
see you in 10 years.
Yeah, right. Gosh, you might get some blips every once in a while. Kind of like you saw the Titans every once in a while have a year, or the Texans when the Colts were great with Peyton Manning. But it's you're going to be struggling. That's for sure. And it's just like long-term struggling too, right? Like it's no window. All right. Well, I think we probably should get on out of here because we got to record another podcast, but that's going to wrap up today's episode of Building the Broncos, powered by Overtime Media. You can find Carl on Twitter at Carl Dumler MHH and myself at Kendell MHH. Also, make sure you head on over to Mile High Huddle, an affiliate of 24/7 Sports and CBS Sports Digital, to find more content covering the Denver Broncos. Head on over to iTunes and leave us a 5-star rating and a comment, as your support can help us continue to bring you our Denver Bronco deep dives. You can follow the Building the Broncos podcast and all our other great audio content by subscribing to the Huddle Up podcast wherever you listen to your shows. You can follow us on Twitter at Mile High Huddle and at BTB Football Pod. For Carl, I'm Nick, wrapping up another episode of the Building the Broncos podcast. We hope you guys enjoyed it, and we will see you soon. Go Broncos.
You've been listening to Building the Broncos. Join Broncos Country's deep divers at milehighhuddle.com to keep the conversation going.